are met, ladies.
We are met. We are here.
We are met. We are here. Hey, everybody. We are the Sirens, and we are happy that you have joined us. My name is Tamara.
Hey. Over here, I'm Gia. Nice to meet you.
I'm Taryn. Thanks.
None of us is sure who anyone is these days, but if you are not familiar with the Sirens, we are a group of sci enthusiastic creators. We act, we write, we direct, we sing, and we also love science and STEM. So we come together to share stuff that we are finding interesting and intriguing, and to share that with you.
Yes.
Using Zoom.
Like the rest of the world right now, because that's the only way we can come together.
Yeah. Oh, I hadn't even thought about that. When I love that Beatles song, Come Together. There's been so much musical collaboration happening on
I know. I
social
haven't been.
media.
Can you send me some stuff? Because I've been hearing like tertiarily of this, but I'm not seeing it. And I just watched that Beatles movie that yesterday.
Oh,
the Danny Boyle. I
Yeah.
thought it was super cute. I think it's like that perfect type of movie that we all need right now, where it's feel good and it has a little bit of a sci-fi twist that they don't sort of get into at all.
Interesting.
Yeah, there's like watching it, blah blah blah. But I'm not going to give it away, but I totally guessed what the science twist would technically be, and my spouse was like, "Of course you know." Well, I'm like, if I didn't, I would feel like a schmuck.
Yes.
Well,
yes.
Speaking of, if we're talking about feel-good music movies, I have to put Blinded by the Light out there, which yeah, it's the Springsteen one, about a kid in working class England who is completely inspired by Springsteen's music. And it does not have a science twist, but as a girl from Jersey who grew up in Central Jersey in Bruce's hometown, I mean, I loved it.
Maybe we'll watch that tonight.
I have inappropriate feelings for Bruce Springsteen. Like, now he looks good.
70.
That guy
he's 70. He's like
takes
owning
care
it
of himself. He looks great, man. Well, we are going to watch the Folger Libraries production of Macbeth that was directed by Aaron Posner and Teller of Penn and Teller. My dear friend and frequent collaborator Jason Lott was in that show. This is the Folger Theater for pretty much anybody listening to this, who you won't likely know where it is, but it's a wonderful Shakespeare Research Center in Washington, D.C., and they have, I think, the most copies of the folios and quartos of anywhere else in the United States. Like, that's their biggest piece of their library. But they also have a professional theater company that's attached to it with the greatest actors from around the world, and so this is going to be a really good production. I didn't get to see the show when it was on in DC many years ago because I was in another show, so there was no way for me to see it. So I'm so excited that they have released that. And I know that Broadway HD has released a bunch of stuff that you can now watch for free right now too. So for those of us who are landlocked in your places not in New York, or in New York and still landlocked and can't go to a show.
So it's funny that you bring up New York. So our secret plan tomorrow, which my 9-year-old daughter does not know about yet, is to kind of break things up a little bit. We are going to do a virtual visit to New York City.
Yes, I've been hearing about these, that people are doing spring breaks with their kids to all these different places virtually, which I think is a brilliant idea.
Yeah, so we're going to try it. So far the plans include we're going to do, we have a map. I actually have like a printed out map of the city. So we're going to like draw some things and wrap them on there for her. We're going to stop by and do a virtual tour of the Guggenheim. We're going to go to Central Park, which means we'll go outside and play outside for a little bit. We're going to have some kind of Italian dinner that we will make because, it's New York. You got to have a good Italian. And then we're going to make everybody go and get dressed in nice clothes, and we're going to watch a Broadway show.
That sounds delightful. I would like to join this.
You are welcome to join us.
I love it. Oh my God. I still have presents for you guys from my New York trip. I got you guys pens from the Apollo exhibit at the Natural History Museum when I was there during the heat wave of July. And I stumbled across them the other day, and I'm like, I had not given them to you. So one of these days, when we can biologically be in the same room, I will give them to you.
Thank you. So sweet of you. I love that.
Yeah, space or the deep ocean.
I was going to say, that's what you're talking about today?
Yes. I'm actually really
Ooh.
excited. I'm really excited about this article because I actually think it gives us, we haven't had, I don't feel like we've chatted about articles that have sort of given us platform for debate because.
That's so funny because I have good debate questions today too.
Amazing. Okay, hold on. Let me share said screen. On the bottom of the article, it says hallucinate. I don't think it wants me to hallucinate though. That would be a little scary.
Oh, okay.
If you were my article, where have you gone, article? Sorry.
No worries.
Apologize.
We are all like to everybody watching. This is definitely a show that is a work in progress, but we all made the decision that to be better done than perfect. So you will see the evolution of this show as we go. Like right now, I'm in my bedroom, which is curiously empty of things because right before the quarantine rules went into effect, we had a huge rainstorm and our ceiling broke and it rained on our beds. So. Right. So we're kind of figuring it all out, but for the moment, it's a studio, and I can't tape in my office because our office is now my bedroom.
Well, you look fantastic, by the way.
Thank you.
Do.
Okay, I found it. Do you see it?
Hello. Yes.
Hold on, scrolling up. Sorry for the motion blur.
No worries. So this I can see is from the Atlantic.
From the Atlantic,
Beautiful.
which is, by the way, these days just killing it.
It indeed, and all the Corona coverage and the Times coverage is all free for everybody, so don't miss out on that.
Exactly. It's they're just really creating, just publishing some incredible content, incredible writers. So this was a piece from the January-February issue, and it's about history's largest mining operation in the deep sea that's about to begin. Now, why this is really fascinating to me, first of all, the oceans are still such an undiscovered country, but this is basically this area in a nutshell. Well, first of all, let's go back. They just only first discovered that iron ore was at, in the Arctic Sea north of Russia. Now you have like these machines that are able to trawl, or whatever the word is properly, outside Namibia, and De Beers has dragged like 1.4 million carats of diamonds in 2018. So you have sort of all these rare earth and gold and silver and diamonds that they're finding are sort of in the seabed. But these days, you have this area of this between Mexico and Hawaii that is basically 2/3 the size of Australia, that they are just finalizing this code to be able to mine. So you have these 20 different international companies that are going to be able to mine all these areas that are around nodules of methane and sort of heat sources. So as we now know, life can exist below the light level in the ocean. So you have these sort of 5 layers of levels of the ocean. The bottom is the Hadal zone, named after Hades. And that's where the Marianas Trench would be. And so this article goes into a bunch of interesting elements about the Marianas Trench and sort of how impermeable it is just because of the pressure. So you have like millions of pressure per square foot when you're down at this 20,000 leagues below the sea kind of level. And so there's only been 3 different types of vehicles that have actually gotten down there. But the issue with this new set of mining that's going to take place, because now they have the technology to be mining these rare earth minerals that we need for batteries. So you have huge volumes of wealth that can be mined in this area that is international waters. So there's this very nebulous sort of offshoot of the UN that is responsible, that is based in Jamaica, that is responsible for writing the code of these companies, of how they're going to be going down there and mining all these minerals and elements. And and you're worried, basically the main issue is environmental disruption down there, because for every vessel that is mining down there, what is it, 2 million cubic feet of sedimentary discharge will happen every day. So you think of this huge plume of sedimentary, like all these tiny little silica that will then be polluting the water and disrupting the ecosystem of areas that we haven't even properly explored because we haven't been able to explore them properly. So you have this you have like the issue of environmental issues, of economic issues, and some of these companies are saying, well, but isn't it better that we're mining these rare earth minerals in the ocean as opposed to using fossil fuels? So we're environmentally, we're more on the wearing the environmental hat because we think that fossil fuels are bad. And then you also have Craig Ventnor is involved in this because he's talking about the microbes, and he's like, we haven't properly, and Craig Ventnor is, I don't even know how to properly describe him. He's a very famous geneticist and genetic engineering scientist who is based in Southern California, down in La Jolla, and he sequenced the genome at the same time as the National Genome Project was taking place, and he's created synthetic DNA as well. But he speaks to the microbes that we haven't properly researched there, and that a whole host of issues could come up with microbial bacteria that is then contaminated in these elements. And I mean, it reads like a sci-fi novel, and this really incredible sort of future of minerals on this planet. So that was my reading, and it's really worthwhile digging into it, because it sort of gives us a interesting place to jump on the, like, okay, so what should we be doing to nullify our use, or to remove our use of fossil fuels? Should we be disrupting another ecosystem? Is it a zero-sum game in this? Should we just be focusing on solar? Can we create batteries that don't need copper or
cadmium or
yeah, what's the main one that it's, I'm trying to remember what it was. Anyway, I can't read it anymore. But yeah, so the zone that they're looking, that these 20 international companies are looking, is a 1.7 million square mile area, and it's called the Clarion-Clipperton Zone, the CCZ.
I mean, I have to say right now, if the world can't decide how to best treat this pandemic, I have a really hard time being optimistic that they're going to be able to have agreements over who gets to exploit this area in any way that is fair or safe. I don't have a lot of, I wish I had more faith in global cooperation right now, but yeah. I worry.
Well, and these companies are just waiting for this code to be fully approved. I think it's like a consortium that's approving it, but they're looking to start this mining in 2021. So
wow.
Yeah. Wow. So these huge companies are going to descend in this area that's basically under the garbage patch as well. It's like, oh God. So
well, I mean, that was the two things I was going to say. I mean, we already have such an abundance of plastic pollution in our oceans that's out of control, that we are already seeing enormously detrimental effects. But then this is the third year in a row that the Great Barrier Reef has been bleached?
Yeah, I don't know but it still is.
Like third or fifth, I don't know, something like that in a row that it's been bleached. Like we are destroying the thing that makes our planet habitable.
Yeah, and the microbes are 10% responsible for how the ocean is able to what's the word I'm looking for? Take in. I want to say for some reason the word subsume. It's not even a real word. I just made it up in my brain.
No, subsume is a real word. Subsume is a word.
Okay, but yes, the carbon removal done by the ocean, the microbes are 10% of that equation, and so if we're messing with the microbes as well.
Well, it's interesting. It's interesting to me in that, astronauts train in water and often in ocean environments for spacewalks and things like that. And it's interesting sort of extrapolating that out when you look at how this whole situation, how this whole issue is going to be treated. Because if you look both at some of the real stories in the newspaper, as well as so many sci-fi stories where they talk about, how are asteroids being used? What's going to happen to Mars eventually when it gets settled? Are we going to terraform it into another Earth? Is it basically just going to become a resource to supply Earth for things? Or are they going to sort of, quote unquote, respect the Martian environment and find a way to have humans adapt more to that if possible? So in the same way that astronauts are using the ocean to train their own bodies, it becomes this, sort of test situation for how would we eventually treat another environment? What are we going to take care of? What are we not going to take care of? What are we going to exploit?
And I was thinking exactly along those lines too, because I've been fascinated by asteroid mining for a while now and planetary resources. And that there's a rock out there that it's like $100 trillion worth of rare earth metals in it, including platinum and rhodium and cobalt, and because they can use spectrometers to know sort of what elements are on these asteroids. And similarly, there's a very nebulous sort of agreement between the international forces of like who owns asteroids, who's going to be able to mine. Even when we go to, you remember the movie Moon, they were mining helium-3 because helium-3 is technically, first of all, it's very limited here on Earth, and it's used in a lot of superconductive experiments and ultimately as a potential energy source. So how are they going to show international cooperation when it comes to stripping these asteroids and getting there and safety? And like, what if an asteroid is kicked out of its orbit and then comes crashing into Earth or the space station,
Yeah. It also makes me think too about who are the people who are going to be doing this mining, right? Like I'm already imagining deep sea fishing and the offshore drilling that happens now. And those are incredibly dangerous jobs. And they're welding underwater. They're doing all kinds. And, I'm just thinking, I have a vision in my head that I was going to challenge you to write it, but I'm TO, but I'm like, maybe I should write this future world where that's where all it is. And so all of the poor people are forced into this. And, like a world, in our world today where people who scuba, they're wealthy because they have leisure time and they can do this. But if the water becomes so polluted and disgusting that the only people who get to go underwater and see that are the poor people, and what if the dynamics of that shifting and changing? And I'm sorry, I have to go now because I got to go.
Right. Do it. I know, that's what.
Right. Well, speaking of people and mining, I'm going to make one of my famous awful transitions and pivot to talking about data mining and my article. So
that's great.
That's not a terrible transition.
Yeah, come on. It's a perfect transition.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's an A to B. I like it.
All right. So my piece, and I'll share my screen. Let's see, share. So my piece is about targeted advertising and data mining, and this idea it puts this idea out there of why don't they just make targeted advertising illegal, because that would solve a lot of problems. So going back first, what is targeted advertising? So targeted advertising is the advertising where that happens when, and I actually pulled up a little article and we'll put a link to this, but it's a form of online advertising that focuses on specific traits, interests, and preferences of a consumer. And how do advertisers find this out? They collect your information from all over the web. So this is where cookies come in. This is how, when you're shopping for shoes on one website, suddenly you go to another website and in the corner, you'll see, suddenly advertisements for the shoes you were looking at pop up. And this stuff follows you. It doesn't matter where you're at, whether you're on your computer, whether you're on a phone, however you're browsing, this stuff follows you all around. And so we'll put this is just kind of a basic. Also, if you want to learn more about how targeted ads work, Consumer Reports has just a quick little video on it if you prefer to get your information in an audiovisual manner. So we'll put that there too.
Thanks, TK. This is all very useful.
Thank you. So
shames me. I'm like, oh, right. I was looking at shoes again, and I was looking at shoes, running shoes, comfy shoes for quarantine shoes.
No, wait, hold on. There is no shame in looking at shoes. The problem is when you look at the shame comes when you look at the shoes, and then your data is mined, and that follows you all around the web. Now, here's the thing, like, the argument for targeted or behavioral advertising is that you get more relevant content. So you get that ad for shoes, which you're going to be more interested in, ostensibly, than just a random ad. And so based on perhaps the content of what you're looking at or whatever the ad server needs to pop up at that moment. And some people really like that. The problem is when that information, though, is then used for other things. So that's when we go to things like the Cambridge Analytica scandal from a couple of years ago, or when that information is put out to insurance agencies or potential employers or law enforcement. So if it were just like an A to B of, you to Nordstrom's and back to you again, that seems pretty, not such a big deal, at least for me. But if it's you to Nordstrom's and then that gets taken out by an ad tech company and that data is packaged together with all the different ways they have of tracking you, and that eventually gets sold to multiple places and can be used in ways you never, ever imagined your data would be used. And that's when we get into huge privacy issues. So the question that this article from Wired posits is, when you look at places like Facebook, there's all these conversations about, well, should we have content restricted? Should we be able to say certain things and not certain things? And that gets into a very tricky conversation about free speech. But what if instead you question social media's underlying business model? And I think this little paragraph right here kind of sums it up. The solution to our privacy problems, suggested Hansen, was actually quite simple. If companies couldn't use our data to target ads, they would have no reason to gobble it up in the first place and no opportunity to do mischief with it later. Ban the right of companies to use personal data for advertising targeting, because that's how they make money. If they can't make money doing it, they're not going to do it. Now, the counter argument against that is that companies like Facebook and Google will say, well, that's how we make money as a company, and that's how we're able to provide Facebook for free. So if you take that away, how are we supposed to provide our platform for you? You're going to have to start paying with it. You're going to have to start paying for it. So I was just curious what the two of you thought about this idea of, would you be willing, let's just go to the what if. Let's say that law did pass. Would you be willing to pay for Facebook if suddenly Facebook said, well, yeah, we're not going to take your data anymore, so because we can't sell it, so we got to make money somehow, so now there's a paywall? And it doesn't have to be Facebook, anything. But I'm just curious about your thoughts on that general concept. Are you willing to start paying for things, or is a certain amount of, behavioral targeted advertising worth the barter of a free service?
I'm going to go and look at it from another perspective, in that I think our data is valuable, has value online, and so we should be paid for our data. So it's almost not like first of all, for Facebook, I barely use it anyway, and if they tried to charge me anything for it, I log out every time. I'll use Facebook for 10 minutes. I'll make sure that I've logged out, that all my privacy settings, I do not want them tracking me. I think that there's a lot more paywalls that we're getting used to these days now. So I feel like we've been conditioned a little bit. Like, you think of even Medium, you only have a certain number of articles you can read. Where MIT Tech's the same, and the Atlantic and New York Times, and so you have a lot of paywalls that you're getting to. So I feel like you are getting conditioned to know that you're going to have to start paying subscription model pricing. I just wish it was more tokenized, that you could pay for an article or pay for like a week's worth of articles or something, as opposed to having to be a full subscription model a month or a year or something like that.
Companies, are you listening? There's an opportunity there.
Well, you got me thinking too, Taryn. I mean, why wouldn't you then also be able to, like you said, tokenize your own information?
Data.
Like what other, other pieces that you would be willing to sell? Because that's the only way, because I was thinking, well, is targeted advertising and using these platforms like Facebook and Amazon and Google, I mean, not Amazon because they're a selling mechanism, but essentially all the other pieces are too. They're just selling it in different ways, but it's not direct sales. But, sort of this idea, could those, we've said as a culture at large that these have been the great equalizing tools, right? That's what caused the Arab or enabled the Arab Spring to take root, et cetera. I'm not saying it was or it was not. I'm just saying these are arguments that people have made. And so is targeted advertising, in a sense, the way where if our data is valuable, that gives people in the lower classes more value to companies than they would normally otherwise have? Or does it increase the class differential? Or conversely, if you were to paywall everything, would you see an even greater disparity between the haves and the have-nots there? And I'm with Taryn. I could care. I have all of those accounts because we have to have them. We don't have to. There's a compulsion and a social sort of agreement that we will do those things if we want to participate in a lot of the things, like the thing that we're doing right now. And I would never pay for it. I dislike it. This quarantine has made me feel even more uncomfortable with social media, because I feel, at least when what I aimed to do was to do things, to show things that were different than my everyday life. I love everyone, but I don't need another selfie in bed. I don't even need another picture of my cat on the internet. I just don't. I live it. I don't need anybody else to validate that existence in me. So I definitely would not pay for it.
And see,
but I
I'm
do
just
like
gonna,
targeted ads.
I'll dissent for one sec, because in this time of quarantine, and I have found, well, I'm reacting differently to different social platforms. Twitter, which I have always found great value in for connecting with people outside of my immediate circles. Right now it makes me so anxious to be on there. And yet Facebook, I am enjoying staying in touch with people that way and checking in on people and making sure we're all okay. So for me, that has been a huge value add. However, when we talk about like the value of data, one of two things. One of the things, it's in bringing up the class issue, going to back to what you were saying. One of the things this article talks about is the idea that small businesses do legitimately use it to be able to get customers. So yeah, when you're talking about a company like Google or Facebook, Google can use search advertising instead of behavioral targeting, and they'll probably stay in business and be just fine. But these small businesses that do actually use it for a large percentage of their customer acquisition, that's a different story. So there is that, scale that you're talking about. So that's an interesting question. And there's something else I was going to say that I forget. So someone else go.
Okay, well, I'll do the next pivot transition. So let's see. We're talking.
Oh, I can do the transition. I didn't know if anyone else had something else to say about this. No, the transition for this one is clear, which is, in addition to small businesses, one of the other things this article talks about is targeting small donors for political campaigns. Yes, and so when we're talking about political campaigns, people we might be electing for president, who do we think of when we are thinking about the president? Gia?
Well, apparently we think of men pretty clearly. This wonderful article from the New York Times, and yet again, I will say that they are offering all of their coronavirus coverage for free right now. And I also found out, if you are in a financial position where you have run out of your free articles from the Times and you run up against that paywall, the LA Public Library, if you have a library card, that you have a digital access code to access the New York Times for free as a part of your library membership.
Cool.
They're also offering all kinds of different things right now because all of the libraries are closed. So anyway, good resource to go to if you're looking for something. But this is an older beginning of the year article that I got again through the
Doesn't the beginning of the year seem so long ago?
It seems like an eternity, right?
Elizabeth Warren.
I know. So this got me
And
thinking
Amy
about the article
Klobuchar.
again, because who likely will be the Democratic nominee? Has he been officially crowned? I've forgotten that that's happening now.
No, not at all. There are still many, many conversations about it happening. So,
well, should Joe Biden become the nominee, he has vowed that he would place a woman in the vice presidency, which in my opinion sort of means he just is having to pick a woman because he has to pick a woman. I don't know. It feels very token. But I suppose, a good token. I don't know. I'm not sure. But this article was about linguistics and about power and equality. So why is it then when we read the word president, we think male? And it actually takes readers 0.3 seconds longer to read president and she together, or her. And so that really got me thinking a lot about language in general, because when I lived in Italy, I had never been so hyper aware of gendered language in general, just because I was living and speaking in a language not my native tongue that used that. And I felt very much, I had two of the most terrible groping experiences in my adult life in Italy. So I also felt the sexism of the language coming into play. And I know I've read about studies that look at languages that will take the word bridge, for example. And if it's a feminine noun in those cultures, people describe bridges as elegant and graceful and, elongated. But if the word for bridge is a masculine noun, they call them sturdy and constructed and reinforced. And they are totally different words that describe the same structures, but based on their gendered assumptions. And there's no doubt that the word president is a loaded term in this case here. So these were people at MIT, University of Potsdam, and UCSD, and they were looking at how people looked at the word she and her in conjunction to the presidency in the 2016 election. But there's a whole host of other interesting things that continue to go through that, not just the gendered language pieces in languages that have gendered nouns and whatnot, but also it would even can influence the voters' likelihood of supporting the candidate simply because they make this assumption about the language, which is really interesting. And that has a lot to do with things like how we even use gendered terms that describe ourselves. So we say congressman versus congresswoman, or you could say representative, right? That's a totally gender neutral noun. That's been true too with freshmen and upperclassmen, to change first year and upper level. And I love that they mentioned they as the word of the decade for a popular substitute for a singular pronoun at the in the antecedent position for all you grammar nerds out there. But anyway, I just really enjoy this because I think a lot about language, and I know we all, the three of us, talk a lot about how words matter. And
Absolutely.
Yeah,
and
for sure.
like, what would, if we have a female president, she'd likely be called Madam President, but there's arguments against Madam because some people feel, because that's also a word often used
Sexual.
to describe, yes,
Yeah.
the head of a brothel. So that, we can't do that. And they talk about in the 70s the fight for the for Ms. And of course I have been a Ms. and adamantly a Ms. for as long as I will be alive, no matter what my marital status.
Me too.
And I love that idea, and yet that Ms. President, it doesn't help. Like,
That doesn't sound
so
right.
what do we do? It's a really big problem. Anyway, it's worth reading if you like this idea.
I'd
I'd be
read how
curious, 'cause,
I think I told you guys, like in Canada, they've changed the vernacular of, the master bedroom to the principal bedroom.
No.
Because master suggested that it's master and slave.
yeah.
Interesting.
I was like, you become so conditioned to a word and what it's supposed to mean, but then you don't take the subconscious. You have to explore the subconscious, the root of it. I love going into the etymology of a word. It's just one of my favorite things.
Well, I think, did I tell you both about the Northwestern University 150th anniversary of women that I went to a couple of weeks ago?
Tell us.
Oh yeah, so this was when we were still allowed out in public. I went Northwestern grad, and so I went to this celebration of 150 years of women being admitted at Northwestern. And they had a great panel. Sherry Lansing spoke, who's one of our most amazing graduates, who, for those of you who may not be familiar with her, she first woman to run a Hollywood studio, incredible producer, and has now transitioned into philanthropy. So she does some really, really incredible things. So the interview was great, but before—
And she started out as an actress too.
That's true, yeah. And before the interview, there was a surprise. They had an archivist come And so, yes, nerd alert. They had an archivist come and go through. She had pulled a bunch of stuff from the archives, tracing the path of women eventually being allowed into Northwestern, because there were sort of a couple of, I'll call them adjacent colleges that weren't officially NU colleges. But one of the things that they got into was the grammar around the degrees. And she pulled up this piece about being designated, how someone was going to be designated a mistress of the arts rather than a bachelor of arts. And that if we think about degrees, we've got a bachelor's degree. And when I saw the thing in your article, Gia, about, freshmen and all of that, that picked it up as well.
Yeah.
So that was part of that same conversation. But I'd never thought about, I'm so used to that terminology. I never thought about like master being a masculine thing. And they never went with mistress of the arts. Ultimately, everybody just got, bachelors and masters. But I never thought of it as a gendered term. It just shows how baked in things are. Now I'm hopeful that is changing. My daughter is and the three of us have talked about this before, sort of our use of guys and that being applying to everybody. And my daughter is very adamant about people not using that to apply to her or to everyone. And
if she can come up with that word we can all use, because I need to find that word that's not folks.
Yeah.
Well,
Friends.
I love
Friends.
y'all.
I use humans. I use humans a lot. Fellow humans. Hey, humans.
Fellow humans. Yeah. I like that. People.
All right. If you all have any suggestions, see, there's my you all. If y'all have any suggestions about what that word might be, we would love to hear.
To replace guys.
Yeah, to replace guys. Like, hey guys, what are you guys doing? So that we have something that is non-gendered and refers to everyone. Please leave us a comment. And if there are things that you are curious about or you've read something great, we would love to know what it is. You can follow us on our social media platforms. And of course, please subscribe so that you can come back for future conversations.
Yay! Love you, ladies.
Lovely to see you all.
Great to see you all. We're still figuring out the sign off for this. Bye, everyone.